Shalom, this is Michael Schulman. I'm the director of Ask Noah International and AskNoah.org. I'm recording this lesson for the Noahide conference at the end of December in Vanceboro, North Carolina. It's being organized by my good friend, Rabbi Yachmiel Altman. We've just finished the Torah portion of Vayigash, in which Joseph reveals himself to his brothers, and I'd like to give some insights about the connection of Joseph with the Noahide commandments. Now, just to go back and review in the Torah, we start with the parsha of Bereshis. We learn about Adam and Chava and their descendants up to Noach. Then in the next parsha of Noach, we learn about him and his descendants up until Abraham. In the third parsha of Lech Lecha, through the eighth parsha of Vaishlach, we're learning about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the three patriarchs. Then in the ninth parsha of Vayeshev, all the way to the end of the book of Genesis, the end of the parsha of Vayechi, which is the 12th parsha, the main character is Joseph. In the beginning of the parsha of Vayeshev, we're told that Jacob settled in the land of Canaan, and then in chapter 37, verse 3, it says that Joseph was the son of his old age, Ben Zekunim. Rashi explains this means that Joseph was a wise son to Jacob. How so? All that Jacob learned from Shem and Ever, he gave over to Joseph. But he didn't give that over to his other sons. Why only to Joseph? Now let's remember that Shem was the son of Noah, and Eber was the great-grandson of Shem. Shem and Ever established houses of Torah learning, and that's what's referred to as the yeshiva of Shem and Ever. All the sons of Jacob learned the teachings for their family who were passed down from Abraham and Yitzchak. And this included Abraham's prophetic knowledge of the Jewish commandments that would be given to the Israelites at Mount Sinai. Abraham practiced those as his personal customs, to the extent that he was permitted within the Noahide commandments before the Torah was given. And these customs that he had were passed down to Isaac and Jacob. But it was specifically to Joseph that Jacob taught the Torah lessons that had been given to him from Shem and Ever. Those are coming from outside of Abraham's family. Now, what was the history of Jacob learning from Shem and Ever? Well, it started even before he was born. It says in chapter 25, verse 22, that when his mother Rivka was pregnant with Jacob and Esau, that she would pass by the entrances of Torah of Shem and Ever, and Jacob would struggle to go out of the womb. So even as a fetus, he wanted to run to learn from them. In chapter 25, verse 27, it says that when Jacob was growing up, he spent his time in tents. Now, what tents are those? Rashi explains that when Jacob turned 13, he went to the houses of Torah study. Which houses is it referring to? He obviously learned Torah from his father Yitzchak, but it says that he spent time in tents of study, plural. So this would include also the houses of Shem and Ever. Now Shem died in the year 2158 from creation, and Jacob was born in the year 2108. So Jacob was 50 years old when Shem died. That means he could have learned from Shem for 37 years. And up to age 63, he was learning at home from his father Yitzchak. Then when he got the blessings that Yitzchak had intended for Esau, he had to run away because Esau was planning to kill him. At the urging of Rivka, Yitzchak told Jacob to go to Lavan, Rivka's brother, and find a wife. In chapter 28, verse 9, Rashi explains how we know that Jacob hid for 14 years in the house of Eber to learn Torah while he was on the way to the house of Lavan. So this was when he was from the ages of 63 to 77. This was after Shem had already passed away. But of course, Eber was giving over the teachings received from Shem and Noach. What was unique about these teachings? Shem had stayed righteous during the dark time before the flood, when the entire rest of the world was wicked. And both Shem and Ever stayed righteous in the time of the Tower of Babel, when humanity was rebelling against God. How did they accomplish this? By staying faithful to abide by the 7 Noahide commandments. What was the situation that Jacob was faced with? He had to leave the spiritual protection of his home and learn how to stay righteous in the land of Haran, where people were very, very sinful, to the extent that they brought great anger to God. We know from Rashi that the people engaged in licentious relations, they worshipped idols, and Lavan especially practiced deception and cheating in his business affairs. So that's why Jacob needed to be very well grounded in all the details of the Noahide commandments in order to stay righteous in that type of environment. But why was it that Jacob decided to teach those details specifically to Joseph? Jacob was a prophet. Perhaps it was because he knew that the spiritual power of Joseph had a special connection to the rectification of the negative spiritual power of a Gentile nation of Edom, descended from Esav, which we know from the end of the prophecy of Obadiah. Or it was because he had a prophetic insight that Joseph would have to go to live in a foreign nation. Now that we know that Jacob was focused on teaching Joseph about the Noahide commandments, we can understand the dispute that existed between Joseph, who was the son of Rachel, and the sons of Leah, who were Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, and Zevulun. Jacob had a tradition to follow the Jewish commandments that were taught by Abraham when they didn't conflict with the Noahide commandments. What about situations in which there would be a conflict between observing a Jewish commandment and a Noahide commandment? Here's an example. Jacob promised Rachel he would marry her, but then he was tricked into marrying Leah. Now, according to the Jewish law, a Jewish man cannot marry 2 sisters. According to the Noahide law, you have to keep promises, and it's also permitted to marry sisters. So he also married Rachel. Now, what about the children of Jacob? What should they observe? The sons of Leah held that the requirement to follow the Noahide commandments only applied to the 3 patriarchs of the Jewish people, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But as the heads of the 12 tribes, they held that they could follow the Jewish commandments even if it would conflict with a Noahide commandment. Joseph, on the other hand, who was especially educated in the Noahide laws by his father, held that they still had to have the observance of the Noahide commandments. In the beginning of the portion of Vayeshev, it says that Joseph would bring reports to Jacob about his brothers. Rashi brings 3 examples in his explanations in chapter 37, verse 2. If we examine them in light of that and some other commentaries, which are the Tosafos Hashalem and Gur Aryeh, we find that in each case, it was when Joseph saw the sons of Leah doing something that he interpreted as a Jewish practice that for a Bnai Noach would violate one of the 7 commandments. Let's step through these and understand them. Number 1 was that Joseph reported that the sons of Leah ate forbidden meat. How so? The explanation by Tosafos Hashalem says that the sons of Leah slaughtered an animal and took off meat from it before its death throes had ended, and they cooked that meat and ate it. Now this is permitted for a Jew if it's a kosher slaughter done by a Jew, for a Jew. And this is how the sons of Leah ruled about the situation. But it's forbidden if the slaughter is done by a Gentile. And that's how Joseph ruled about it. So this is explained in the Divine Code, Part 4, Chapter 3, Topics 2 through 7. That if a Gentile slaughters, he has to wait until the animal has completely stopped its death throes and the heart is completely stopped beating before any meat is removed for consumption. The second disagreement was that Joseph reported that the sons of Leah were calling the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah servants. Bilhah and Zilpah were daughters that Lavan had had from a Pelegesh, a concubine, and he gave them, when they were still minors, to Rachel and Leah as maidservants. In such a situation, if it would have been after the Torah was given, and Leah and Rachel would be Jewish, then Bilhah and Zilpah would have the status of permanent servants. And the explanation in Gur Aryeh says that the sons of Leah were discussing about that. Joseph overheard and reasoned that they were really implying that the sons of these maidservants were born with tainted lineage as children of servants. That led him to the conclusion that this is why the sons of Leah were snubbing the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. On the other hand, Joseph held, according to the Noahide law, that for Gentiles, there's no condition of being born into the status of a servant. This is explained in the Divine Code, Part 7, Chapter 9, Topic 10. The third situation was that Joseph reported that the sons of Leah were engaging in immoral relations. The explanation by Tosafos HaShalem says that the sons of Leah took Canaanite women for wives. And when they did this, they would marry both a woman and a daughter she had had from another man. This is forbidden in Jewish law, to marry a woman and her daughter. We can explain that when the sons of Leah converted the woman into the family, they held that it was a Jewish conversion that erases the convert's previous family connections, which made it permissible. But it's anyway not strictly forbidden within the Noahide law for a man to marry a woman and her daughter. So what was Joseph's criticism? When the sages spoke about the moral abominations that the Egyptians accepted in their society, they said that a man would marry a man, a woman would marry a woman, a man would marry a mother and her daughter, and a woman would marry two husbands. So therefore, in the Divine Code, Part 6, Chapter 1, Topic 7, explains that from early biblical times, the marriage of a Gentile man to a woman and his stepdaughter was rejected as a disgusting practice. It was held to be immoral, and this is what Joseph was reporting to his father. Now, all of this took place before the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. It's not to us to say who was right in these two opposite opinions, but the sons of Leah had the majority at that time, and Joseph was speaking Lashon Hara about them. As Rashi explains there, on chapter 37, verse 2, Joseph suffered retribution related to each of those areas, measure for measure. After his brothers threw him in the pit, they slaughtered a goat to dip his garment in blood, and they didn't eat its meat as Eber minachai. He was sold as a slave, and he was subjected to the attempts of his master's wife to seduce him into adultery. But in spite of all this, Joseph endured. The disagreement they had was a mechanism by which God brought about that Joseph became viceroy of Egypt and saved that whole region of the world from starvation. And he was able to settle his family in Egypt to fulfill the prophecy that they would become a great nation there and be brought out by God to become the Jewish people and receive the Torah at Mount Sinai.